Folks, this conversation was so incredible that we had to break it into two parts. This is the PeopleNova Podcast. I'm Rachel O'Neill. Today, in part one, we discuss how the pandemic is creating a never-before-seen event in our lives. We are acutely aware of this black swan event as we live it every day. Deeply understanding the lasting impact to business, and the human side of business, while we live it, is a tremendous learning moment. So let's get this started with our guest, an extraordinary human, Donnie Bedney. I promise you won't want to miss part two, releasing in January 2021. Welcome everyone to the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill, and today I have an amazing guest with me. Donnie, introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rachel, for having me. Donnie Bedney is my name. I live in the greater Boston area and excited to chat today.
Awesome.
One of our favorite topics.
Yeah, people. So our podcast is about the human side of business. And I know that you work with a lot of organizations to help them transform. So first question of the day, what does that mean to you, human side of business? When you hear that phrase, like what comes up in you?
When I think about the human side of business, business literally would not exist without people. Some of the most amazing brands, businesses, business models, etc. People are at the center of all of that. Even if the business is not necessarily people-centric, which maybe we can talk about that at another time. But the reality is, no business exists without people, and so I believe that organizations who are able to realize that, to be collaborative, to literally, kind of put people at the center of everything that they do, are not only some of the most successful ones that we love, but also as you think about sustainability, growth, profitability, et cetera, those businesses tend to come out on top.
Yeah, they do. They do. As much as there's efficiency in algorithms and like recommended songs on your Spotify and stuff, there's still a lot of human touch into that, right? Like a human had to make that song in order for it to be on Spotify in the first place, for the algorithm to recommend it.
Human had to create Spotify. It didn't just come out of nowhere. Humans have to maintain Spotify on the back end, right? As Spotify continues to evolve, right? It's new people working once again on kind of the mainframe, et cetera. Yeah. How many times have you, not necessarily just been listening to Spotify randomly and just love a song, but, maybe a friend, or someone else has referred a song to you? Because at least in my life, as I think about listening to music, I'm far more likely to get, through WhatsApp or whatever, form, a link to a song like on Spotify or on iTunes or, whatever else from a friend. And that referral from a person is the reason why I go and look, and listen to this song. It's not like I'm just randomly, on any of these, places and hear amazing things. Although that does happen sometimes, just referrals are more likely. The
parallel is like referrals in employment context, and like, how do you get to know other people in your network? How do you find that hidden gem? How do you get that wacky friend to send you something from the field and be like, yo, you really got to talk to Rachel. She's a little wacky, but
Yeah. So I believe, obviously there's subcultures and all these kind of things, but there's been numerous studies, and I think both of our lives, probably could testify, to this, that, really talented people hang around with other really talented people. Right. And so I think that's amazing. In an amazing way to, add talent to organizations or projects or businesses or, anything that you're doing. One of the best ways for me, because relationships are really, just my life, to go about things. If I'm moving into a new endeavor or, whatever, I'm going to reach out to those I'm close with to say, hey, what are your thoughts about this? Random opportunities, right? You and I have talked about random opportunities where I'm just like, hey, what do you know about this company? Do you know this person? What are your thoughts? Et cetera. And so you find people that you respect, care about, et cetera. And then, reach out to them accordingly, which actually, if you don't mind, I'll tie into a theory that I have, because I truly believe that we're living through a black swan event right now.
Yeah.
Right? And so obviously accelerated, by a global pandemic, which hopefully, will be the only one that we have to live through in our lifetime. And then, specifically within the U.S. anyway, for those of our listeners who aren't necessarily based in the U.S., it's also been kind of multiplied by social unrest that we're experiencing as well, right? And so this kind of stew that we have going on, during this time has really created like significant accelerations of change and innovation, to the point where, one of the things I've been sharing with, on different panels that I've been talking to, is that the talent pool at this point in time is deeper and broader than I believe it's ever been, to the point where the way that organizations have been handling this time is either, really endearing or engaging folks to them and to their brand, arguably for years to come, right? Which is increasing retention, or, and this is just probably classic 80-20 rule, right? A decent amount of organizations are not doing well at doing that. And therefore, I believe that, I think the percentage I threw out last time was like 95%. It may be higher than that, but I'd say like 95% of those people whose organizations have not handled this time well are looking and proactively looking, to the point where, as you think about referrals, assessing one's organization, assessing gaps that you have to, achieving goals or building something, find those gaps. And I guarantee you that there are people now, today, that you can reach out to fill those gaps, who are going to be more interested in joining up with you, building out something amazing like a podcast, other organizations that I know you consult with or are part of. And so I'm really encouraging people that, as you think about this time that we're living in, it is the time where you can literally completely elevate the level of talent within your organization within a relatively short period of time, because the talented people that, under traditional circumstances and markets and situations probably would not be, as open to leaving, are looking for a right opportunity, are looking for connections to mission, are looking for companies that have taken stances on social justice, or have treated their people well during, this global pandemic, have been able to find ways to, not furlough people, and, all of these other things. Mm-hmm. And on the company side, I would say, talk about your mission, right? Talk about more about why you exist, how you value people and the impact that you're having, on communities that you serve.
Yeah.
I'm sure you got plenty of stuff to talk about on that, but that's kind of how we talk.
100%. I got nothing. I saw the best tweet the other day that said, attach yourself to a mission and a calling and a purpose, not like a company or like a brand or like even an executive or a person, right? Like, I admire so-and-so, right? Steve Jobs always gets thrown out there. Well, pros and cons to him, but like, not attaching yourself to a mission or a purpose is what you're talking about, right? From the labor side, from the employee side, right? Like, even in a huge period of unemployment, and I know a lot of people are out there struggling and like doing that soul searching and being like, what do I do? I think there still is a lot of power in understanding what organizations inspire you to do your best work, right? And
absolutely.
Yes, we need a job. Yes, we need to put a roof over our head and provide for our family and everything. But like, being able to wake up every day and say, the mission that I'm working towards is making me be the best accountant I can be, right? Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I
oh man, no, completely agree. Go ahead, finish.
Oh my God, this is a great like love fest here. Like, oh my gosh. and I think on the company side, like to circle back to something you said, like companies who have not handled, the period of Corona and virus mitigation and the social unrest, who have not handled that well, are going to struggle for a very long time to find talent.
Yep, definitely. I mean, once again, there's been studies, as I've been calling it, BC and AC, right? So before COVID, there were studies, and we know for a fact that 70% of basically a connection from an engagement perspective is going to be your direct manager, right? Yeah. That's where the statement, like, people leave managers, like they don't leave organizations, right? So if you don't have that connection, just going back to everything we've been talking about, like, the people side of business, right? Like it's such a significant thing. And if organizations, don't have that connection to mission, and they're not transparently, expressing that or telling the story of why they have the impact on, communities, et cetera, then a lot of people, I mean, there's so much opportunity out there right now, and so many organizations that are hiring, funny enough. Whether you're on LinkedIn Jobs or Indeed or anything else, there's so many organizations who are hiring. I was just talking to a CHRO in the Northeast, for a really large division of like a Fortune 50 company. He's hiring 9,000 people a week.
Oh, right? That's like volume.
His business, but their business, right? Once again, like classic black swan event, right? Like innovation, opportunity, et cetera, grows. So when you think about extremely large organizations that are, really catering to the fact that people are at home, right? I mean, what do we know about not Steve Jobs, my buddy, Amazon guy, Jeff Bezos, right? Bezos. So, I mean, how many people could basically, transition half of your wealth and then still, increase your personal net worth, that much more within the same year? Like, I don't think we could live without Amazon, right? Like, I mean, the amount of things ordered in my house alone from Amazon may have like increased profitability for, the company. Not obviously I say
single-handedly,
right? Like our little cul-de-sac, we get more Amazon packages, more things from FedEx, UPS, et cetera, delivered right now. And so as you think about, just the number of businesses, Uber Eats, right? Like, I mean, et cetera. How many people are ordering in, now? And obviously a bunch of us are probably itching to be, it would have been our preference, I'm sure, to do this in person.
Oh, absolutely.
But I think that there's such an amazing opportunity right now. And the other thing I would encourage, if you are looking for opportunities, and so for people who are listening that are thinking about, what they want to do next.
Great.
Once again, more opportunity now than ever. And I would echo what you just said, Rachel, where it's like, take your time. We understand like the urgency. I've been in transition between opportunities, et cetera. With no trust fund or, anything to like lean on, right? Mm-hmm. That's not my life or my story. But I think that thinking about organizations and where they stand in times of stress, in times where a lot of people are shrinking, et cetera, and kind of showing, who they really are, believe that that's who they really are as an organization. And don't be fooled that, it's potentially going to change, like when things turn around,
Beautiful.
We get a vaccine, et cetera. Like, don't do that.
Yeah.
And also kind of building on something you shared, I would also say, at least for me and the point in my career where I am, the people is really one of the most important things about that, right? Because they're going to live out the mission, et cetera. And so when I think about individuals that I'm going to partner with, that I'm going to potentially report to or going to work for me, et cetera, I also want people that actually share my values, right? Because the company mission is one thing, but like, do the people who work for the organization actually share those same values and kind of like live the mission on a regular basis? And I think that that's important to evaluate as well as you're having conversations or even interest conversations as well. And then there's a direction that I want to pivot for a second, but I'm going to let you interject first.
Oh my God, you're the best. Cause I'm just like, oh, there's two things I want to like build on. This is great. So when you're like, a minute ago, you were like, oh, this is how, when things are stressed, like these are the behaviors we see. I totally agree. One of the metaphors that I use, I'm a very outdoorsy person, very lazy. And one of the metaphors I like to use is whitewater rafting, right? When the river is full of money, cash, water, right? Water line is high and cash is flowing and everyone's on this boat and we're feeling great and we're going down the river and maybe we got the beers, trailing behind us, right? Like lazy amazingness, right? Who doesn't want that life when cash is flowing and like times are good? I talk to people and I'm like, you know what? Your culture, your organization culture, your values really come into play when that water line lowers and the rocks start to surface. And then you got to figure out how to navigate those rocks. Those rocks will always be in the river and you will always be navigating them along this really long river to infinity, wherever it goes.
Wow.
Right? Like,
and beyond.
Here we go. But like those rocks will always surface. Sometimes you all have, high cash flow. Sometimes you're going to have low cash flow. Yep. How does your organization behave and make decisions when those rocks surface, right? And the pandemic, the social unrest, like, hey man, those are rocks. How is your organization navigating those?
Yeah, amazing analogy. Love it. I will. I promise I will use it another time, and I will give you credit for it.
Oh, you're the best.
Completely agree. And another day we may talk about just once again hiring the right people so that organizationally you can be fiscally responsible and in a better position. Financially to kind of weather these storms, right? Yeah. So that's one of the things, once again, as you think about evaluating an organization that you join, I think that I'm hopeful that people are taking this time, which, once again, like some of us have never lived through a time like this, right? If maybe grandparents or others who grew up in the Great Depression or whatever, that's probably the closest. Yeah. And I think it would have been my great grandparents probably that were living through like the Spanish flu and that those kind of things in like the early 1900s, right? So outside of that, there's not too many people who've actually ever experienced anything like this, and so. It's once again golden opportunity to take this as a learning opportunity, understand that it's a black swan event, definitions of increased innovation, opportunity, acceleration of change, at this time. And once again, the people, organizations, et cetera, that embrace this are going to come out on top. Now, once again, and this will be the quick pivot, is if you are thinking about utilizing this opportunity and thinking through it, from a place of abundance, there is no better time in your lifetime. The time is now. I'm looking into the camera. The time is now, right? Because for arguably the first time ever in your life, as you think about new opportunities, as you think about, a concept that I always like talking about, like creating versus catching, right? I mean, there's, my coach used to tell me about that all the time. And it is, instead of catching opportunities that people are, throwing out there, jobs, et cetera, that they have, can you create an opportunity that your strengths, your passions, et cetera, are built around? And once again, for the first time, every single person that you want to get in touch with, that you want to spend 15 to 30 minutes with, learning about their company or anything else, for the first time, emphasis, once again, for the first time, exactly where all of those people are. Pause. Where are those people? at home, right? All of those people are at home.
Yeah.
Bored of being on Zoom, bored of, not getting out and meeting more people.
Yeah.
Quick note on LinkedIn, quick email, etc. Would you mind chatting for 15 to 30 minutes?
Easy.
In the next week or two?
Easy.
You're basically, you almost are shaming people into, like, there's no way that they can say, I'm traveling for the next 2 months.
Oh my God, the typical excuse.
Right. My schedule's packed. Oh, I don't know if I can fit in the time, etc. Like, no, I know you're at home. I know you're tired of being at home.
You're not
I'm tired
in
of
an
being
airport.
at home, right? Yeah, you're not in the airport. Like your meetings, like you're trying to step away from your computer.
Yeah.
By the way, like I'm an interesting person that, you need to meet.
Yeah.
And so I've encouraged so many people to do that because I know I've done it myself.
Yeah.
And just increasing my relationships and stuff, because there's no better time than now.
Yeah.
To do that. And I actually have a formula, quote unquote, for people if they're looking to become, an expert in a specific field or industry or anything, that I think
I want to get to your
perfect
formula.
timing to do that. No. Interject.
Because
I wasn't sure if we were going to share it today, but just interject.
We might have to do a part 2 for our listeners to come back to. No, I'm kidding. But like one of the things you said, I am an interesting person that you want to meet. I love that, right? And I coach my clients to really stand in their power and be like, no, you are amazing. Don't subordinate yourself. Don't delete yourself from the conversation. One of my friends went camping the other weekend with us, and he was the photographer, and he like took all the photos, like really great photos, right? But he also has an amazing selfie game, and I happened to take some photos of him, and he didn't post them to the group. And I'm like, don't delete yourself from history. Like you were there. Add your photos. You were there.
Please.
Right? And so I love how you framed, and I want to make sure our listeners hear this because it's so important. I am an interesting person you need to meet. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And building on what you said, right, Rachel? I mean, it's other people have said this, or I've heard people, hint at this, right? I mean, the fact that you are who you are, like, is your superpower, right? I mean, that's like literally the fact that you're Rachel O'Neill, like I'm Donnie Bedney, and that is enough. Like that is our superpower.
Yeah.
The as soon as you attempt to be, I attempt to be you attempt to be me,
or a leader like Steve Jobs, like, yeah, that doesn't work.
Yeah, like that's fine. There, you can learn from people's successes. There's breadcrumbs and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
But your superpower is being you, right? I mean, as you think about your makeup, your individual talents, etc., there may be people who have similar experience. There may be people who have, the same degrees, come from backgrounds, work in the same company, work in the same role. The fact that you are you, if there is a solution that we're looking for or a challenge that we're looking to solve, you will come at it in a completely different way than somebody else. Maybe you come to the same conclusion, or whatever, but the way that you actually go about that is going to be unique to you. And the more people begin to embrace that, I believe the more opportunities, we could talk about The Alchemist or something like another time, but the more the universe kind of like gets out of your way and kind of like starts, bringing things to you, the more that you're willing to embrace that.
Do you think it's twofold? Like, one, me as the individual, I need to know my superpower, and I need to be able to stand in that, right? On 2 feet, and be like, you know what? I am going to be quirky and wacky and make funny pirate jokes and talk about river metaphors.
Yeah.
But do you think the other fold is, and I'll just say, societal pressures to conform? Well, this worked over here, so we need to do just that same thing. Well, no, man, don't. Because, I mean, those constellation and those indications and those parameters worked in that situation.
Yeah.
Our situation is different. My DNA is different. Our situation as clients, like, Do you think it's twofold?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's just think about the fact that, like, think about resumes slash CVs, right? Even the way that companies are going about identifying talent. Yeah, there's been, once again, there's numerous studies, right? Because somebody came out with a study, it went viral, people started doing it, like, oh, past performance is the best predictor of future performance, right?
When you're looking for cookie cutters, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you need, what is it, Edward Deming? When you need repeatable, lean, efficient results.
That's it, right?
Different.
I mean, think about why colleges were even created, right? Like, I mean, we're going to continue building that because we need more people to work in these manufacturing plants, right? The Industrial Revolution, right? I mean, that's all we need. We need you on the assembly line. We need you to be able to pick up this phone, put this one here, and move forward. But that building on that with like this concept of creating versus catching goes into the entire fact that like, if you own who you really are, and then once again, kind of practice, telling your story, that's the powerful piece that, companies really, and more importantly, you don't need multiple companies. You just need the right one.
Yeah.
Right? For you to really just accelerate and grow. And that's what you should be looking for, as a candidate who is evaluating organizations, is thinking through, and, there's assessments out there. There's great friends and like Rachel and I, who know you, who can tell you like, who can pour into you to say, hey, you're really great at that. Right. Yep. And also, and I'll just say it this way, but like, remove, the false sense of humility for a second. Because once again, when you talk about society, right, like being humble is like this, like big thing. Like, oh, you should be humble.
Don't be arrogant. Like, don't let your ego get in the way.
Yeah, but it's like, don't push your sensitivities or feelings of inadequacy on me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like me. So I wear lapel pins.
Great.
And also, if I'm working from home, like, or doing, having a conversation on a podcast or whatever else, I want to show up as my most authentic self. And so sometimes, depending on the topic, it is, some sort of jacket and my favorite lapel pin, which at least this time around is a butterfly. And one day we'll talk about, metamorphosis and, kind of all of those things.
Have you gone to Burning Man?
A little bit more.
Did you have a transformational experience at Burning Man?
I have not been to Burning Man. I have not been to Burning Man.
Metamorphosis was one of the themes, 2018. There's a lot of like butterflies and transformation and cocoon action happening. Sorry.
Got it. No, it's all good. I mean, the metamorphosis piece for me is just, I think it's just really powerful because I saw a comic a while ago, and you've probably seen the same one, where it's like, it's a caterpillar talking to a butterfly.
It's on my Instagram.
Yep. And the caterpillar is like, you've changed. And the butterfly is basically like,
dude,
yeah, that's what we're supposed to do. Like, that's the essence of life, right? As we continue to talk about people. So trying to round out this point, as you think about creative versus catching, I think it's so critical for you to, once again, to finish our point that we were talking about, is both things: understanding your superpower, and then at the same time also making sure that one, you're finding an organization that is and really a leader, unless you're going to run the entire org yourself.
Great.
Who is going to, also recognize that and not be afraid to let you go about things in the way that, is necessary. I just think it's so underestimated, at this point. And, so often people are just, worried about catching whatever that next opportunity is, because it's like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do. And that societal pressure, like you talked about, is a true thing. But that's also why, environment is so critical, right? Mm-hmm. The people that you surround yourself with, what are you listening to? What are you reading? Mm-hmm. Et cetera. Because if you're plugged in, i.e. to the matrix, then it's going to be very, very difficult to want to believe something else.
Yeah.
And I think it's so much more powerful of a tool to actually begin to, once again, create and talk about who you want to be, and like the person that you're looking to build and kind of create in the future. And the more that you can begin to articulate that, that's when like you're going to actually begin identifying the right opportunities for you, as opposed to the ones that people want to fit you into.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay. So I want to go down this thread a little bit, right?
Let's do it.
What if you are that leader, right? What if you are that leader, right? Either hiring for your team. I work with a lot of CEOs building companies, right? So they are like trying to scale and grow and rapidly bring the humans into the organization, and like, how do I do this? But there is a little bit of fear. I see that in my clients, right? Of following the protocol, following the steps, and I think I got your matrix reference, but correct me if I didn't, but like, if I'm in the matrix, then things will succeed, right? So a little bit of formula. How do leaders step away and be like, you know what, that formula is actually not going to work for me? Like, honor, respect, thank you, Steve Jobs, moving on, right? Thank you, next, as my girl Ariana says, thank you, next. Like, if you are that leader, how do you say that with confidence and be like, we're going to actually go to market differently, or I'm going to look for that wacky friend that always refers random music because maybe they know somebody who can solve this like dilemma.
Yeah. So it's interesting, right? Because I think one of the reasons, so the matrix reference was actually more of a tie-in to something you had previously said, which is that, kind of the fact that people have kind of done it before, like societal pressure, is one of the reasons why people do things. And so from observing leaders, working with leaders, having been an executive leader, what I find a little bit more is that people almost go about things in the traditional way, as a safeguard to failure, right?
Yeah.
So, your board, your investors, etc., aren't going to get upset if you go about things the traditional way and they don't work out. Right. And so you can always fall back on the fact that, oh, well, just continuing to use his name because we've been using it. Oh, well, this is how Steve Jobs created Apple, right? Like we're following the formula, right? Yep. We're doing all these things. People tell us this is what we need to do. We need to hire engineers early so we can, and machine learning and are we using AI and are we monetizing our data?
Yeah.
Doing all of these things. But one of the biggest things that people are not willing to do is the identification of people, right? Yeah. And how can you do that uniquely? And I know, I'm trying to remember the question, but I know Elon Musk has a very interesting interview question that he utilizes. That's something like, if you start in the North Pole and you turn right, and then you turn right, and then you turn right. Where are you, or something like that. I'm completely flubbing the question, and I'd probably get it wrong.
Okay.
In general, but I believe that there are more unique ways to identify talent, and that the interesting part that I would say to any leader about identifying talent is that you most likely have identified talent, pretty much your entire life. And I would ask you to just very quickly think about some of the best hires that you've ever made, and think about some of the worst hires that you've ever made. And if the quote unquote traditional process was the way that you identified all of those people, then I'm going to use a study that a buddy of mine used to use. Then percentage wise, I think the exact percentage is 30%. It's only 30 or 40% of those people, probably stayed on with you, right? So as a leader, some of the best people you've ever hired, some of the worst people you've ever hired. Probably some of the best people you've ever hired are probably 3 or 4 people out of 10, right? And some of the worst people you've ever hired are either, 6 or 7 people out of 10. Mm-hmm. So in that case, this is crazy. In that case, you technically shouldn't have followed the traditional path. You should have just flipped a coin.
Because it would have been better.
It would have been better odds.
Oh my God. Oh, that's
literally, you could have just flipped the coin for every candidate and you would have had better odds than what a traditional kind of interview process, from a success perspective reveals. And so to that extent, why not think through, some unique ways, especially once again, at this time, Rachel, I'd encourage all of your clients, like, do you know your gaps, within talent? And then literally just go after the best people that, you've either admired their work, you've seen it, or think through some non-traditional, kind of aspects so that people can bring different perspectives, but maybe transferable skills. So think through, the basic fundamental pieces, right? Like don't get me wrong. Like if it's a very technical role, like I'm not telling you to bring, somebody who like puts that their expertise is like Microsoft Office, into your company as a software engineer who's going to be, creating your product, right?
Totally.
Like that's not what we're saying. So let's just be very clear about that.
Very clear. You need an accountant who knows how to tie out the books.
Yeah. Done. Period. Like, if we go to the doctor, right? Like we want somebody who's graduated med school. Like, I don't want somebody who hasn't, like, doing my surgery.
Who slept at a Holiday Inn last night, okay?
Oh, no. Man, please. Please.
But beyond that, right, like, there is still a lot of, like, values alignment, gap analysis, right? Like, looking into the future and being like, all right, what's my superpower? What superpower do I not have? Which takes a lot of humility of like, yeah, I'm not good at spreadsheets. Great. You want to tell me how to do that? Great. Awesome. You want me to help your process? Great. I'll do that. Right. A leader doesn't have to be great at everything.
No, it shouldn't
be.
Yeah.
Should know what they're not great at. And that's where building out a team, finding a co-founder, hiring your next, superpower, like that's where the strength comes in, right? And so I think sometimes leaders have that fear, I'm not following the script, I'm not following the steps, or that insecurity of, if I don't, then it's going to fail, right? Like, oh, that's the formula that works, and if I don't follow the formula, then I'm going to be a failure, right? And it's like, we need to.
But trying to get everything perfect is actually, more of a risk.
Perfection never happens.
What you actually need to do is you need to accelerate your rate of failure.
Yeah.
Right. So if there are people, if you have fears around identifying talent or like people that aren't going to work, etc., I encourage you to just talk to more people.
Yeah.
Right. Like the more people that you churn through, and not being afraid to, if a person is not working out over X period of time, like they're not going to like magically transform, like, a year from now or anything else. Like, have a process to very quickly identify whether or not this person is going to help you fulfill your vision, your goals and, your strategic goals for the organization, et cetera. And don't be afraid to walk away, from that. If you need to fill that gap yourself or somebody else, you can pick up the slack, based on your existing leaders, but don't be afraid to like move away from somebody either. You literally, you have to speed up, your rate of failure. And if you can accelerate your rate of failure, then you're not going to fail every single time, right? Like that's just you're going to be that much closer to success if you can accelerate.
Better than flipping a coin.
Man, I'm telling you, man. That blew my mind.
In the startup world, we often say hire slow, fire fast. And I think that also gets warped sometimes, in that people are like, oh, we should have like 8 bajillion steps in the process. And I'm like, well, I'm not sure it's number of steps that is the slow part. I think the slow part is that relationship building, like actually having a conversation with the candidates, as opposed to recruiting and interviewing, because I think during an interview,
Mm-hmm.
everybody's on their best behavior, right? Like,
oh, of course,
company wants to hide their like unglamorous parts, and like the candidate wants to hide their unglamorous parts.
Mm-hmm.
Hey man, I got flaws. I don't know about you, but I know I got flaws. Sometimes I swear.
Open up the kimono.
I do go to Burning Man. No. What else is wrong with me? I mean, we could say a lot of things. Anyway,
sure.
but no one is perfect, right? And going into relationship building and saying, okay, what is Rachel's superpower? What's Donnie's superpower, right? Like, how are we going to augment each other as opposed to compete with each other?
Yep.
One of my other guests earlier in the podcast, she said this. She looked back and she's like, you know what? I made a wrong hire because my ego got in the way. And I was more concerned about, the candidate outshining me and outdoing me. And I'm like, that's some great honesty, really tough.
Oh man, such a great learning. That's why she's a leader, right? Like, leaders are willing to admit that kind of stuff. That's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree, Rachel. I think I'm going to go back to something we talked about earlier, right? I believe that, once again, organizations need to do a better job at telling their story, because I believe that you will attract your tribe the better that you tell your story.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so many people are like, oh, we're going to go through these interview processes and stuff like that. But, even if you're going to have a process, then, to your point, as you're talking about getting to know people, like, create a process that's unique for your organization and like the culture that you actually not only have, but I think more importantly these days, like in this time, think about the culture you want for the future that you're planning on building.
Yep.
And that you want for the future, and then create your process, in order to identify people that will fit that.
Do you
right? Not the culture that you have now, but the one that you want for the future.
Do you want to create a learning organization where we fail fast, we grow, we learn, we iterate quickly and move on? Or do we want an efficiency? Do we want to stifle and just have people, do the manufacturing step 1 to step 2?
Cogs in the wheel.
Yep. Like, what is that organization? And you know what, leaders? You want to put some micromanaging and some steps and some structure. Yeah, you're going to get cogs. No, people are not going to tell you when things go wrong because you want cogs. You don't want people to use their brain, which is brilliant and beautiful. We all have one, and we all want to use it.
It's, it's so, I think any leader, majority of leaders will admit within whatever their comfort circle is, exactly the times that they followed that process and done exactly that, right? Just as your, previous guest talked about, just as much. And that's why, even as a leader, it's important to know your strengths, continue to develop yourself as a leader. If you don't have a coach, like, get one ASAP.
Both of us are available for coaching.
Like, please, there's so many. I will refer you. Rachel, obviously, I've coached some people in the past. I will refer you to my, my executive acceleration coach. Like,
friends are great.
So many people.
Your board of advisors are great. Your family, they want to love you, but your coach is really going to put you to the flames, right? And like,
they are.
That's what you want them for.
Yeah, iron sharpens iron, man. I mean, that's the goal, because you know what they say about pressure, right? It creates diamonds, but it also bursts pipes, right? So you just need to make sure that, like, you're finding somebody that's like helping you become a diamond, not isolating yourself to the point where, once again, you kind of burst. You don't want to do that.
Thank you for joining us on the PeopleNova Podcast. My name is Rachel O'Neill. The team here at PeopleNova Human Capital would love to hear from you. We are always curious to hear from our listeners. So go ahead and send us an email, podcast@peoplenovahc.com, with your workplace questions or suggestions for who you'd like to see on our show. If you send us an audio memo, we may include your question on the show. Lastly, we are here to amplify. Our guests are amazing entrepreneurs, and we want you to forward our newsletter to someone in your network who needs to know the amazing things our guests are doing, so together we can make an impact. Thank you so much. Take care, and we will see you next time.